The Trans-Pacific Partnership is a multilateral trade agreement between 12 Pacific Rim countries, including the United States, Japan and Australia. Negotiations would appear to be almost complete, and the Australian government is set to sign the deal. However, it will be a bad deal for Australia and for Tasmania in particular. It shouldn't be signed, and if it is, it should be overturned. One of the most significant problems with the TPP, until now at least, is the secrecy surrounding the negotiations and the fact that we know next to nothing about what is included in the agreement that will be shortly signed by our government in our name. We don't know what will be included, what will be excluded, what restrictions will be put in place, what penalties, what safeguards. We know very little about it, and that is no way to go about putting in place one of the most important international agreements this country will have ever signed up to. What we do know about the TPP, however, is that it will include investor-state dispute resolution provisions. Now, in essence, this is a provision that will allow foreign companies to sue Australian governments if those governments have any practices or laws which harm or could be said to harm the commercial interests of those international companies. So, for example, Big Tobacco could sue the federal government for plain paper packaging. Very relevant to Tasmania in particular is it would allow big multinationals to sue the Tasmanian government for Tasmania's GM-free status or the quarantine safeguards on our aquaculture industry. There are any number of ways in which Tasmania's unique circumstances and the fact that we have a clean and generally disease-free environment, how that can be challenged. Another example would be New Zealand. The fact that apples can currently go from New Zealand into mainland Australia, but the Tasmanian government prevents them coming in to the island state for fear of fire blight. Well, this would allow a New Zealand apple exporter to take the Tasmanian government to court. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, but when you've got small governments with small capacity to fight big multinational companies, we could well lose that fight. And that will put at risk all sorts of things in this country. Things like our agriculture, the cost of medicines, our environmental safeguards, and any number of other things. You know, you can't help thinking that there is so much wrong with the TPP that indeed the federal government is more interested in getting a signature on paper, being able to announce a big trade agreement for political gain, rather than the public interest or the best interests of Australian manufacturers or farmers. In other words, this is as much or more a political fix as it is a win for the Australian economy. Regrettably, negotiations seem to be as good as finished, and a signature will soon be put to paper. But this will, however, eventually need the ratification of the Australian Parliament. So it still matters that we all make our voice heard. So again, get in touch with your local newspaper or talkback radio station and voice your concern. Meet with your local Member of Parliament or Senator. Do whatever you can to speak up and to shine a light on the problems with the TPP. Do what you can to apply pressure to the government at this last minute to not sign it. And if it is signed, at least pressure on the Parliament in the future to not ratify it.